Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to panel 2B on general aviation and helicopters. I would like to start with saying how happy I am to have this opportunity. It's the first time for me to visit China. It's, of course, the first time to see Shanghai as well. And I have to say that it has been so far an impressive experience. We started with 2 days in Beijing with the CAAC, where we have established some very good connections and ties that are very promising for the future. And now we have the pleasure to have this first safety conference together. And I have the pleasure of moderating a very interesting panel on a very interesting type of product, helicopters. And I believe that that is the right landscape, whereas on the slides we have an aeroplane. Here for us, they have put a helicopter. That's perfect. I will start by introducing shortly myself, and then I will ask my panel members to do the same. I am Claudio Trevisan, and I am the head of the Air Operations Department in EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency. Within my portfolio, within my responsibilities, I have two areas that are particularly interesting in this context. I have the team that is responsible to develop the air operation rules for helicopters in Europe. And I also have the team that is in charge of monitoring how the European rules are applied by our member states, the so-called standardization function. And before joining EASA in 2006, I have been working 10 years in the aviation industry in Italy, mainly with aeroplanes in the fixed wing, but I had a couple of customers that were operating HEMS, and that was amongst my most interesting experience professionally. That was for me. Can I ask my panel members to have a short introduction, starting with Mr. Liu? I think it's on.
我首先介绍一下我自己，向各位。我名字叫刘峰，来自中国民航局运输司的，来自民航局运输司，是这个司的司长。谢谢。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Ferreira. I'm from Airbus Helicopters, head of airworthiness, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
各位下午好。
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Zhu Tao. I'm working in the Flight Standard Department of CAAC. My job is to issue policies in air transport. I'm very glad to be here.
Fleet test pilot and safety manager for Babcock MCS. We operate a fleet of up to 400 aircraft around the world in HEMS, firefighting, and many other roles.
大家好，我的名字叫
Good afternoon. I'm Zhao Yan from the Avic company. Our company is responsible for running helicopters. It has a history of 10 years. It's working on the medical emergency rescue of helicopters. I'm very glad to be here. 非常感谢。
We can start with the introduction of the topic at stake. If we can have the next slide. Before commenting on what you see on the slide, I would like to share with you the first two things that I have noticed when arriving in China from an aviation perspective. The first aviation thing I noticed was landing at Beijing Capital International Airport and looking at how many wide bodies, narrow bodies. It was impressive. I felt like my home airport, which is Venice, Venezia in Italy, It was like a Lego game compared to Beijing capital. But the second impression was there's no helicopters. I have spent 4 days in China so far, between Beijing and Shanghai, and I have seen one helicopter flying, which to me is something totally strange. Why? Because I come from an environment in Europe where helicopters are a unique but very common form of transport. They are part of our everyday life. I come from a town that has 36,000 people. It's a small village in the scale of China, but we have a hospital that has a heliport, and the city has a landing site equipped, and we have certain operations ongoing on a daily basis. So, from our perspective, from, let's say, the European perspective, the helicopter operations are a form of transport that combines flexibility, adaptability, agility, and cost effectiveness. It is something that you cannot have with other means of transport. It operates where aeroplanes cannot go. It operates where land vehicles cannot go or cannot go practically. And in Europe, we see helicopters covering a very wide range of roles, often, most of them, in support of the public interest. And in these days, we are also witnessing a very fast improvement in various areas, improvements in technology, enabling new ways of operating these machines, these fascinating machines, and improvements in training, because then you also need to ensure that the human component in the system is able to operate as safely as you would like to. Next slide, please. I have my contacts in the helicopter industry in Europe, and I have asked my contacts to provide me with some figures. I told them, look, I'm going to China. Can you give me some figures? It's complicated because different databases, different sources. So take these figures with the benefit of the doubt. They may not be the most accurate figures. But the figures that I have been provided with say that in Europe we have more than 7,000 helicopters used for civil purposes, of which you see the breakdown. And the figure that has struck me the most, I still wonder whether the figure is correct, but that's what I got. 300,000 HEMS missions flown every year. Probably here they have counted the primary missions, the secondary missions, all sorts of missions. But even if the figure is not the right one, it's still quite impressive. Next slide, please. And then in terms of types of operations, and now we start talking a bit the regulations that accompany these operations from the regulatory point of view. In Europe, we have started by regulating fixed-wing operations, and we have European rules in place for fixed-wing operations since quite a number of years. Whereas in the helicopter domain, it's something more recent for us. And now we have in place several tiles in the puzzle. We have not completed the puzzle fully, but we are getting there. We have rules for commercial air transport, or CAT, as we call it. We have rules for helicopter emergency medical services, or HEMS. We have European rules for helicopter offshore operations. They will be applicable as of the 1st of July 2018, but they are published, they are there. We have rules for non-commercial operations, both with complex and non-complex helicopters. And one of the latest tiles in the puzzle, we have rules for specialized operations, or as it's also called, aerial work. And they have just become applicable, 21st of April 2017 in Europe. So we have a set of rules, of different rules, addressing different types of operations. And why do we have different rules? Why have we felt the need to regulate in a different way? Next slide, please. Because we have tried to develop a regulatory framework that provides for proportionate rules. Proportionate in the sense that you can have different risk acceptance levels. This is a simplification of concepts that are much more complicated, but in the limited time that we have today together, we can say that in helicopter operations, we have a concept where starting from the most stringent requirements, where we want to accept zero risk, the top of the pyramid over there, we have, in some scenarios, in some cases, helicopter operations requirements aiming at zero risk. One example could be performance class 1 requirements when operating in congested hostile environment. But that's not the only possibility of risk acceptance. We have other scenarios where we accept a bit of risk up to a certain defined safety target. One example can be operations without an assured safe forced landing capability, where we accept a certain level of risk, a certain level of exposure based on data, based on known engine reliability. So we know how reliable an engine is, hence we know what risk we're taking. And then we have another step in the pyramid. We have scenarios where we accept a given risk because it's still better, it's still preferable than a comparative or a comparable risk. For example, when operating in Arctic areas, the North Pole region, you accept the risks that are related to operating there with helicopters because a different transport means would be riskier, would be more dangerous. So you accept the risk in comparison to another risk. And then you have the basis of the pyramid, which is the well-known concept of ALARP, as low as reasonably practical. And one example of this area of our risk acceptance pyramid is our rules for the HEMS operating site, which is an accident site. And you don't have control of an accident site. The accident happens where it happens, in the middle of the motorway, in the middle of a congested area, and so on. Hence, there, the rules accept an even higher level of risk based on best operational judgment done by the crew. This was just to introduce the topic. I don't want to talk too much. I'm just the moderator of the panel. And you know, I come from Italy, and Italians have a reputation of being a population, a nation that talks a lot. So in order to mitigate this risk, I have only prepared a few slides. And now I'm going to give the floor to my estimated panel members. And I have prepared a question for each of them. So if you allow me, I will start with Mr. Liu. And the question that I have for Mr. Liu is whether you could share with us the CAAC policy with regard to general aviation in general, and more specifically, what are your plans with regard to enabling helicopter operations such as HEMS? Thank you.
So in response to the host questions, I'm going to talk about it from 2 points. First, let me respond to his first question. The Chinese government emphasizes the importance of the development of the civil aviation industry. Last year, the State Councilor first proposed that the general aviation industry should be a strategic industry as well as an emerging industry. This year, the authorities have issued reform policies. Meanwhile, this year we have issued the 13th five-year plan regarding the general aviation industry. In summary, the policies of the Chinese government are aimed at tapping into the decisive role of the general aviation industry while bringing into full play of the government's role of coordination. So we combine the invisible and visible hands of the government to mobilize people's enthusiasm about this industry so as to enable the general aviation industry to play a critical role in pushing forward the economic development. Is manifested in the following ways. The first is to emancipate our mind, to deregulate together along with the macro management. Right now, we have a little to excess management. In the coming years, we will try to deregulate our power and manage those that are supposed to under our management. We are going to adapt a classified hierarchy of management for flights that reach customers. We're going to intensify our management. For freight and training of flights, we will deregulate our power. Second, we will have tests so as to offer guidance. So far, the authorities have approved several programs, including airborne travel. This also includes the reform of the system of the management of the general aviation. This requires us to break the old-fashioned practice. So through experimenting in some test trial places, we are going to popularize them across the country. Third, we will improve our regulations and procedures. Right now, we have much access management for the industry. Currently, we are using the transport regulations to manage the general aviation industry. This is not in line with the law of this industry. So through opening trial sites, we will spread our experience and then translate them into regulations and practices in accordance with the requirements for the development of the general aviation industry. So this is a policy I wanted to talk about. So to conclude, the general aviation industry in China is prospering. The enthusiasm on each side is also thriving. Now we are in a transitional period from old procedures and systems and regulations to new ones. within 3 to 5 years, if we can achieve this transition, I believe we will be able to create a favorable policy environment for the general aviation industry. In responding to your second question, the HEMS business has attracted great attention from the Chinese government. I think this is an emerging form of industry because despite the fact that it has a history of 100 years in Europe, but in China, it's still in its embroidery stage, and its market is yet to be developed. As China develops its economy and society and people's ways of life change. For instance, we have traffic congestions and traffic accidents. In these events, in these scenarios, helicopters play a critical role. China has a large territory with frequent natural disasters like earthquakes. For instance, in Yushu in Qinghai province, the HEMS services of helicopters play an essential role. So we need to expand our government. So over the years, the Chinese government has been working actively on this in this field. Last year, we had a seminar on HEMS about how to apply the development of helicopters in China. This year, we are going to have dispatch a team to the EU countries to promote our cooperation in this field and learn from their advanced experience. And meanwhile, we are promulgating the regulation rules on helicopters management is going to be completed in July this year. We will also hear from the medical sectors to further our understandings. We are also working closely with the EU countries and the US so as to draw upon their experience. Nowadays, we have 10 companies, including the Jinhui company.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liu. I have scribbled down a few key items of your speech, and I welcome your commitment in terms of developing a policy that will facilitate general aviation operations and specifically HEMS. I have noted down 3 main elements that I would like to recap. One is the role of the authority as an enabler, facilitating, developing proportionate rules that facilitate the development of an important piece of the puzzle. The second one that I will remember is HEMS as a priority for the society, enabling a new service to the society. And the third one that I note with pleasure is cooperating with Europe, that on this field has some experience, so that we can put together our experience and your experience and achieve something together. Thank you very much. And I would like now to pass the floor to Mr. Ferreira, who will give us a different perspective on the same topic. And the question for Mr. Ferreira is, you represent a very large European helicopter manufacturing, covering all types of activities mentioned in my introduction. In your view, what is the role of a manufacturer in enabling the proper functioning of the system as we have described it, so that it can achieve the intended safety levels? And I believe Mr. Ferreira had 1 or 2 slides. If we could have them on the screen, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Claudio. So thank you to give me the opportunity to share the view of an helicopter manufacturer. But I cannot resist first to present you a little bit Airbus helicopters and giving you some key facts about what Airbus helicopters means. Airbus helicopters has delivered half of the civil helicopters worldwide in the last 2 decades. It represents 11,000 aircraft in operation nowadays in 152 countries for more than 3,000 customers. The most important values I want you to remember is that 69% of our customers have very few number of aircraft. Considering those who have less than 5 aircraft, we are at 86%, and the number of operators having 1 aircraft is 60%. So when we are talking to safety, we have a different approach to this repartition, in particular with some values I will share with you related to the accident rate. Airbus Helicopters participated to the foundation of the International Helicopter Safety Team in 2006, where at the foundation of this team, a worldwide database has been used as a basis to calculate the accident rate of helicopters worldwide. And the rate is considered to be in 2006 3.5 accidents per 100,000 flight hours. So if you compare to what have been shared this, just before in the panel 1A, what it was 0.2 accident per million of flight hours for large commercial airplanes, you see the difference and you understand why there is a risk-based approach in terms of operations. So today, some facts also for 2016, the Airbus helicopters fleet worldwide have accumulated 3 million of flight hours in 2016, which is constantly increasing over the years. And the last 20 years, if we refer only to the Airbus helicopters fleet, there have been a reduction of 20% of the accident rate and also 20% of the fatal accident rate. But we are far from the ambition to have a tendency going to 0 accident, and far to have an ambition for the fatal accident rate, because if we consider it for not only Airbus helicopters, this rate has been stable since the creation of the International Helicopter Safety Team in 2006. So before I address your questions or try to give some points on answer the questions, Airbus helicopters, just to understand, is the original manufacturer of helicopters, but not only. So we are involved in research, development, manufacturing, maintenance, and operations of helicopters, as well as airport operations, helipad operations, to be more concrete, where we are owning some helipads. So in the complete range of activities from research up to maintenance and operations, Airbus helicopters have an expertise. We provide, for example, what we call turnkey solutions. So we provide helicopters fueled on an helipad for services where we consider everything, including mission operations. So Claudio, I come to your question. How can an helicopter manufacturer sustain a system to achieve intended safety levels? And as you have seen on this slide, there is 5 main axes. Innovation in technologies and designs, training and support to operations, training and support to maintenance, safety management systems, which have been also in a panel discussed, and international cooperation. So let me tell you some words on innovation, technologies and designs. We consider helicopters has been to be made not only for pilots, also for maintainers and also for owners. The target is, of course, to meet regulatory requirements, but exceeding them at the same time and implementing safety enhancing systems. Just considering the pilot workload and the situation awareness, reducing the pilot workload and increasing the situation awareness is one of the key enablers to reduce the most frequent cause of accident, like being unintended IMC or controlled fly in 2TMM. Technologies like autopilot, pointing space on precision approach systems, it basically says the pilot is entering a point to be reached by the helicopters and is automatically transitioned onto it, are aiming at reducing pilot workload, and those are today's available on Airbus Helicopters product. Situation awareness systems like digital map with the fusion of different type of data, being obstacles, routes, and also traffic, as well as head-up displays, other technologies we are implementing in the helicopters to enhance the situation awareness. Airbus is also doing research in burnout, whiteout, and low visibility landing systems, because one of the most critical phase is landing, in particular in unprepared sites, as you mentioned for HEMS. And Airbus Helicopters is investing on those technologies for new generation aircraft. Being more concrete, giving you one example. Airbus Helicopters install on all its newly produced aircraft a small camera in the cockpit, which is bringing an enhancement in safety, in particular, giving the ability to analyze the data of the flights, analyze what the different types of operations, and bringing to the customer's organization the ability to do a proactive safety management, looking to operations, looking to the different types of situations the pilots are confronted to. So technologies and design cannot be the only axis of safety enhancement and needs to be complemented by the four other axes mentioned. For the second one, training and support to operation. So I mentioned before that the operators of helicopters are rather small organizations. So Airbus is proposing and offering worldwide different types of training for pilots, from ab initio pilot training, conversion training, up to full flight simulators in a worldwide network. We are not the only one doing so. It's considered in the industry as being standard practice, but it is very important considering the type of missions and the very different type of missions. So we adapt the training, proposing operational training in full flight simulators, enabling pilots and crews to work on coordination or other aspects. Airbus Helicopters was the first one to propose and established FCOMs, so flight crew operating manuals, helping organizations to produce their own operation manuals. Those ones today are available for the two largest aircraft of our fleets, so the H225 and H175, and will be further on deployed for the rest of the fleet. This is the way Airbus Helicopters is supporting operation. So looking to maintenance. So Airbus cooperates with Technician and Engineering School for initial education, being with the increase of missions, there is an increased demand on skilled personnel, so we are cooperating with different type of schools and organizations worldwide. A very large number of maintenance and engineer training is available to answer the needs of large or small operators. Training centers are integrated in the Airbus Helicopters network, which are providing practical training on aircraft, but not only, 3D training, virtual training, using digital continuity with the Airbus Helicopter systems. Just to give you one example, there are classrooms where in a 3D environment, the teachers are simply showing how you deinstall and reinstall an equipment. Airbus is investing also on digital maintenance planning, work preparation, and solution for enhancing reality systems. So, for example, just think about maintainers wearing goggles being shown in a 3D where the position of the different equipment or task has to do when he's in front of the aircraft. This is today the technology which is available. Simplifying the maintenance, development of skilled personnel and digital continuity are enhancing the safety, but it is not sufficient. We have to rely on safety management systems. So an SMS is a safety culture enabler. Airbus Helicopters implemented SMSs in different areas and are running it for flight operations, maintenance, production, and is implementing it in a design organization. So Airbus proposed to support any type, different type of organization for implementation of SMS. In parallel, we participate in international working group aiming at defining SMS standards and regulatory framework. But I will not further detail this because we have the panel 1B, will give us a good insight into it. Last but not least, the last point, international cooperation. Claudio mentioned it. If you want to look to a database giving you information on helicopters operations just on a national level, you're gonna have had a hard time. It is simply not existing today. It is not existing in Europe. It is partially existing in the US because the FAA has introduced a survey for general aviation to be filled every year, giving the basic information of how many flight hours, how many takeoff landings, what type of aircraft, and so on. This is one of a key axis Airbus Helicopters is working on in any possible working groups, proposing the establishment of such databases. Reacting after an accident, an incident, is the way we are working since years. But if we would want to go to the proactive mode, there is a need of sharing data. There is a need of having databases and so on. For these purposes, Airbus Helicopters is member of the new sectorial rotorcraft group, being part of the CAAC-EASA consulting bodies. And as I just mentioned before, Airbus Helicopters is strongly supporting the International Helicopter Safety Team since its creation. For your information, in each of its Airbus Helicopter subsidiaries, there is a safety officer, an aviation safety officer, who is participating locally to the IHST initiative. That's why we are calling in China for the establishment of an international helicopter safety team group, enabling safety promotions and safety enhancement. And just a couple of words to finish. Airbus is focusing on reducing accidents due to maintenance and operation reasons, and for this purpose is doing safety roadshows in cooperation with local authorities. So Airbus proposed to implement safety roadshows in China in cooperation with CAAC, and this will support the helicopter operation growth and at the same time enhance the safety level for helicopter operation in China. So just if you allow me just two small words of conclusion. So helicopters, as we have mentioned before, are employed for a large variety of missions in unprepared areas and changes conditions. So addressing all possible axes of safety benefits, it's crucial for us. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Ferreira. You shared with us what a large manufacturer can do to support the proper functioning of the system. I have to say that it makes a lot of sense when you consider the first figures that he mentioned. I'm thinking of the fact of having 86% of the customers with less than 5 helicopters and 60% of them having only one. It's clear that from the perspective of the manufacturer, you have access to a much wider, broader picture, and then you are in a better position to provide support on the various axes that he has mentioned. Thanks again, and now I would like to ask a question to my fellow regulator, to Mr. Zhu Tao. And regulators, in my view, have a key responsibility in enabling this system to work. And the question for you, Mr. Zhu, is could you please share with us what CAAC plans are with regard to the development and implementation of operational requirements that will enable helicopter operations such as HEMS?
To begin with, I want to thank Mr. Claudi. In Monday and Tuesday, we have conducted in-depth exchanges in this field in terms of our management. So today, we are actually friends with each other already. I'm very pleased to share with you my view in terms of the SMS management. I would give you a overall picture. If you have specific questions, we can have further discussion. First, in my department, I'm responsible for the management of helicopters. Our regulations have covered all the operators. Among them, 135 and 91 cover our management in general aviation. For passengers, the helicopters are aimed at 931. Currently, my management is based on 135 and 91. Currently, in the paragraph of 135, there are specific requirements about the performance and the operations of helicopters. This is in line with the Annex 6. So in paragraph 135, we have relevant policies. We are still yet to issue concrete regulations. This is based on our status of operations. This is our management model. According to our statistics in 2016, the flight hours for general aviation are hard to calculate. It's basically between 500 and 500,000 flight hours. 13 of them are related to aerial work. 12% of less than 1% of them are for private operations. The operations of our helicopters are within those 12% of the air work, which is still quite limited. I also have expectations about the overall development. Now we are actually reaching a saturated level. We have 3,000 pilots within the general aviation. Most of them are trained in China, but in China, due to the changes in macro policies for the general aviation flights, there is still a room for improvement. But for aerial work, drones are taking a large share in the market. So we can say that in the future, if we can stimulate the development of general aviation, we will be able to make progress. The general aviation development in FAA is basically for private operations, but for aerial work and training, they take only about 10% of the total business. If the general aviation industry is aimed at developing rapidly, we need to promote a short route transportation of concern to people's livelihood. But since this takes a small part in the aerial work, this will have limited relevance to our overall development. Third is regarding safe management, we basically focus on the development of the national policies. We base our management on the people's livelihood, and also we are striving to strike a balance. If we increase our invest, we should also, in meantime, we should also balance our management. From our point of view, we should be clear about what to manage and what to regulate, and we will regulate training air work. For training, this might be limited, but for aerial work, it's pretty much the same. For a strict management, we have passengers helicopters. We are going to keep a close eye on them and intensify our management. So if we we are going to combine macro management and deregulation. HAMS will be one of our priorities. So how are we going to manage HAMS? We should cover human factors, drones, etc. We are also thinking about the ways to improve HEMS and better the personnel's training and enable those capable people to conduct HAMS. In Europe, there are serious requirements about HAMS, but in China, there are not. So we want to get close to the proficiency of the European countries. And also, we need to think about the organizations. So far, it's still not perfect, This means that the 91 HMS helicopters, there's still a lot of work to do about it. So when policies, relevant policies should be put forward, should be based on the development and the management of the entire industry. So when it is not developed enough, it's hard to conduct macro management. Nowadays, in China, this is a question that deserves our attention. So I think HEMS right now in China is at a critical stage. How far it can go and how much contribution it can make to the country are all the questions that we should take into consideration.
First of all, thank you for your kind words with regard to our cooperation at regulatory level. It was a pleasure to work with you on Monday and Tuesday, and I look forward to the next steps. That was just the beginning. And I also welcome your commitment on developing a regulatory framework that will enable and that will facilitate helicopter services, starting possibly with HEMS. This makes me confident that the next time I will have the pleasure to be in China and to be in Beijing or Shanghai.
我们看到很多直升机以后希望都能够在空中飞行。现在我想把话语权给 Hello 先生，他代表了一个非常大的直升机运营商，他们囊括了各种类型的直升机。因此，我想跟你提的问题是
in ensuring that we can achieve the intended safety levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. And first, I'd like to say thank you to CAAC and to EASA for inviting me out to this conference and to allow me to see this great country and this fantastic city. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share some of the knowledge that we've gained in Babcock. I've been part of developing a safety management system since 2012 within the organization, where 12 operating companies or air operating certificate holders were merged. When we started, we had a fatal accident rate of 5 per 100,000. We're now down to 0.7, so we're well below the global average, and we're very proud of that fact. In fact, we reached 0 in December, and we sadly have had an accident since then. But the key thing about that is we have had a strategy, and we've stuck with that strategy, and that's some of what I want to share. The first question is, what keeps us safe? And what keeps us safe is understanding the risk environment. And I'm aware that the risk today is that it's 4:30 and everybody's had a good meal, so we need to keep on moving. I think it's been explained 2 or 3 times over different presentations today that the accident rate has been falling, but we've reached a glass floor. We don't seem to be able to get below a fundamental level. We're seeing accidents that we don't predict, and they're still occurring, and there's something about classic SMS that may not be supporting us. How are we going to fix that? The first thing that we must all understand is that compliance is not the same as safety. But we have some very important tools that we have to employ and that are there that give us a baseline. The starting point, I would argue, would be the certification specifications. They give us an air vehicle that will do a job safely. Next comes the regulations and then the associated acceptable means of compliance and guidance material. And they will take us to a level of safety, but I would argue that is an absolute minimum. Beyond that, using the safety management system, an operator will achieve their level of safety that's acceptable to them and should be as low as reasonably practicable. That will differ from role to role. If we go to the next slide.
Can we have...
If we can.
the slides of
The
Mr.
point
Harlow?
that I was aiming to make is that if you look at the fixed-wing world in commercial air transport and public transport, an aircraft flies down the runway, it joins airways, it will fly an approach. Everything about that is regulated. Even the approach is regulated because PANSOPS tells you how to create an approach. Within the helicopter industry, we have multiple roles. The aircraft do all sorts of different things, and yet they have a set of rules that are no bigger than those that apply to the fixed wing. And if you look at the certification specifications, CS29 for helicopters is about a quarter of the size of CS25. Yet we carry out maybe 10 roles compared to the one that a large aircraft will do. So we as an operator need to be aware of the limitations of the aircraft that we're buying. We need to be intelligent. One of the key issues that we've identified is that there is no role relation when you certify an aircraft, and that's for good reason. Yet when we buy an aircraft, do we as an operator look at the capability of that aircraft to carry out the role? So my question first to everybody here is, who chooses the aircraft that you buy, the helicopter? Is it your customer? Is it your operations director? Is it your CEO because he went out to a very nice lunch with the OEM's CEO? Or is it the CFO because he wants the cheapest aircraft there? Do you know what you're buying? An example that we've discovered recently is that there are aircraft that you will buy that appear to be brand new, yet their type certificate is issued against a regulatory standard that's 30 years old. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're not aware of the limitations of the aircraft you buy, then you're expecting performance from it that you may not get. The important thing is that an operator needs to be an intelligent customer and understand the aircraft that he's operating and the limitations that apply to it. Two aircraft sat side by side may appear to have the same performance. One will be cheaper. Always ask the question, why? Talked about understanding the risk environment. And a lot of people today, particularly John Monk from British Airways, has talked about the use of data and how we can collect that data. The more modern the aircraft, the more data we have. We have a very, I would say, nascent FDM program in the helicopter world. It's mandated for oil and gas by our customers. We are now bringing it into across the whole of the Babcock fleet over the next few years. With that, we're hoping to have data where we can identify those things that nobody else would notice. The classic safety management system relies on reporting. It relies on events. But if the pilot doesn't notice the event because it was low level, then he can't report it. Whereas the use of flight data monitoring will allow us to identify those low-level events that are giving us the low-level signals that are pointing to the accident that we can then avoid. Final responsibility, I think, that the large manufacturer, as a large operator has, is very similar to that the manufacturers have already outlined. We have a lot of data and a lot of knowledge and a lot of information. I believe we have a moral duty to share that information with the singleton owners, with the small operators, so that they don't end up having the accident that we knew how to avoid. As a result of that, we've already created, for example, in the offshore world, Heli Offshore, which is started off with the three North Sea operators. And it actually was our request to Airbus for FCOM, and they thankfully came up with something which was very useful, so thank you very much. But the important thing is that we've created an industry group within oil and gas. All operators now in the North Sea and many in America and around the world are joining. That gives us the ability to share knowledge. And there is now a process where we are creating an information share and a data sharing process. The data will be there. We can use the big data. The next step for us is to do that across all our lines of business. So in summary, we need to understand our environment, we need to be an intelligent customer, and we need to share data and information. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Harlow. And in fact, you just had a very quick recap of your contribution, so you have saved me a couple of minutes. I don't need to do the recap myself. I just want to add one thing that you have not mentioned in the recap, but that you mentioned at the beginning, which I personally love, which is compliance is not enough. So I believe that an important contribution of the operator is to complement regulatory compliance. That is the baseline. You have to start by complying with the rules, but that's not enough to achieve the intended level of safety. And you have to combine compliance with knowledge of the risks, hence data, that tell you where the real risks are. Maybe some of them are not fully mitigated by simply being compliant, and then you have to invest on that. Thank you very much. And now, last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Zhao, who represents a Chinese HEMS operator. And I would be very interested if you could please share with us what has been your experience so far with regard to developing and introducing helicopter operations in China, specifically HEMS operations, and what are your plans for the future? How do you see this developing?
Right. First of all, I'd like to take 5 minutes to show you what we are doing at our company, what we mainly do, so that you'll have a general understanding of what we do. And based on that, our medical helicopter medical relief, we've got several practice and experience with which we can share with you further. Our company was set up in 2006. We've been working on helicopter operation for 10 years. In 2015, we officially start our helicopter medical relief. We only focus on helicopter operations. So we, in the medical relief operations, we only use helicopter. Would you please turn to the next PPT, please? Now, as you can see, we have different models of helicopters in collaboration with Italy's Leonardo's helicopter. We purchased for the first batch 35 helicopters. Among them, 25 are 9 are AW139. All of them are assembled and printed in the uniform color and style. And we printed medical relief, these Chinese characters, on the outside of the helicopters, so that basically this is the only thing they do, the helicopters. Next slide, please. This is the inside of the helicopters. We have medical devices, equipment, for example, for respiration, for the heart diseases, and for injections, just to list a few of them. This is our team and the members in the team. After 1 year of development, we now cover 13 provinces, 18 bases or centers. Now, these are pictures to show you that this is actually what we are doing, because a lot of people suspected if we were capable of doing that, because sometimes if we do medical relief, we need dozens of helicopters at the same time. We were not that sure at the beginning, but after 1 year of trial, we actually managed to do that, doing medical relief operations with helicopters. So these pictures show you our collaboration with local hospitals. Now, for our personnel, for our professionals, we've got 130 people, around 130 people, and also cabinet crews 120 ones, and we've also got more than 60 operators. This is the call center in Shanghai. These are real case scenario pictures. We have also our own relief mechanism. The way we work this is that we collaborate with relief centers, hotline centers, and top-level hospitals in different provinces together. So we do training of personnel together. So in this way, we're complementary to each other, making full use of our respective advantages. We also have a hotline with which our clients and our clients can dial this hotline, And then we'll provide one-stop services by first of all locating your geographic location and then get the data and information to see which of our bases is the closest one, and then we'll get prepared for the on-site relief. We'll be able to take off in 30 minutes. Of course, the number varies from case to case. It all depends on air traffic control and the coordination with local government and regulatory bodies, of course. Next. Now, this is some of the cases we've done. As was said by Mr. Claudio, his data in comparison with us, our data is negligible, but in the past years, in the past 1 year, we've got about 30 cases, not that many compared to his number. What we have been doing is to hospitalize some of the emergency cases, and also we also do medical relief for marathon events, for example, and we managed to provide very important medical treatment to those who have an accident in the marathon race. Next slide. Now, so above is a very brief introduction of what we do. This is not for advertisement at all, but just I want to take this opportunity to tell you what we've been doing. For those of you present here, I understand that you're all from the regulatory bodies or the policymakers in our area. We've been in the general aviation industry for more than 10 years, so we have the first-hand information and we can feel how much we've achieved so far. General aviation industry in China is still at its nascent stage, which means that we are full of vitality. We're still like a baby. But the problem with a baby is that it's not in a stable stage. It's still developing. So you need a guardian for a baby. Likewise, for general aviation, we need the attention to it. So as guardians, the CAAC serves exactly as the guardian of everyone, all the players in the general aviation industry. Now the issue is how do we manage? How should CAAC manage the general aviation industry? Now, as a parent, if you say stop every time a baby wants to try something new, then you are sucking out the vitality from the baby. So in terms of parenting, the Western style is to encourage babies to try new things all the time. Instead of telling him or her not to do something, what we actually need to do, ideally, is that you need to create a safe and facilitating environment for a baby. And also you need to tolerate the possibility that babies make mistakes. Only in this scenario that you will be able to talk to the baby and to correct his mistakes and then to facilitate a further positive development of that baby. So I think this is one thing that's important is that to have constant, regular exchange and dialogue between the parent and the baby. Now, so that the parent understands what is in the mind of the baby, and you will be able to have the chance to talk to each other, and the parent then will have the opportunity to tell the baby, now, according to my experience, what is best for you perhaps is what, and I think this might be better. So for CAAC, I think it is good for you to instill your safety management philosophy into the general aviation. And when the two sides are on the same page, I think that is an optimal environment. For example, for our company, we've got multiple bases in different cities and provinces. The way my head is the regulatory body of Shanghai in the eastern area of China. As I said just now, I want them to be on site on our bases quite more regularly. Every time we accompany the local regulatory body to our base, we actually learned a lot along the way. We learned actually a lot from them in terms of how to regulate ourselves. So now, before they come to our base to regulate us, to supervise us, we're actually regulating ourselves using the methods we learned from them, and we have lists of our bases come up with lists of things that they need to pay attention, and they submit that list to us in headquarters. So this is what we've been learning from the authorities, the local authorities. They told us, they have been telling us what to pay attention to. Now, this is not during the period of time when we do not need to provide that many medical relief operations. Then we'll have a time window in which we can train ourselves and improve ourselves. Back to the baby case, for example, some of our children are not always academically good, so they might choose to leave school early and to gain their own experience by going into the society and trying out everything. I think this is exactly what our company has been doing. We've been making trials and errors. We've been experiencing and experimenting by ourselves with the guidance of the local authorities, and I think this is very good. We are still at the nascent stage of the helicopter medical relief operation. I was listening very attentively to the previous panelists, and I think we are all more or less on the same page, and we have similar philosophies, concepts in our regulation and management. I think I've been learning a lot of good news from this panel. Thank you.
Ms. Zhao, I have greatly enjoyed looking and listening at what you are developing. And I also appreciated the type of relationship that you have described between the operator and the authority, which is a relationship where they both engage in a constructive discussion aimed at growing, aimed at improving. And it's the type of relationship that we also think is the right one, where regulator and operator work together in achieving the intended safety levels. And I wish you all the best for the future development of your operations. And now in the remaining 15 minutes, we have some time for questions. So if you would like to take advantage of the panel members in front of you, you may ask any question. I see a volunteer.
Good afternoon, panelists. I'm from the marketing of helicopter. I'm in the medical relief. So in the previous years, we've been working with, for example, Ms. Zhao in the same area in medical relief and in emergency search. Now, it is my privilege to see you here this afternoon. I think I'm going to ask two questions concerning regulation. The first question is, as you said, the 91/135 regulation on medical emergency EMS. 135 means there's little resources in the country. For 91, there are many resources, and many operators within our country have been very proactive in doing EMS operations. However, for authorities, when you come up with further regulations, what are your considerations based on the 91? Which kind of regulations you're going to add in? Is it possible that for the 91 class operation companies, is it possible to allow them into this area as well? So that's on the regulation from the Chinese authorities. The second question, I also have this question to the Chinese authorities. In the population dense cities, we have appointed companies to do the medical relief. So what is your definition of the population dense cities? Thank you.
Mr. Zhu, but everybody feel free to contribute.
问题提得非常好。有点像考试。第一个呢，关于应急医疗这一块儿，我是否要？对不起啊，我先把这个，我听英文啊，我都关了。是这样的，第一个呢，回答你关于135和91应急医疗这一块儿，我们是不是都要提到135这个层面上？目前还在讨论。我们允许咱们行业里的同志们给我们提更多的意见，我们也会借鉴更多的外部的经验。
Coders. According to FAA rules, we only allow 135. As I said, do I need to elevate my my regulations to a higher level? It all depends on the reality. If there are safety issues, an increasing number of safety issues, then of course I'll make the regulations stricter. However, if we don't have that many safety issues, then of course we're losing the regulation a little bit. As I said, we're still discussing the possibilities, and we've got different opinions within our regulatory bodies. From my personal perspective, however, I believe that to liberalize things is the better thing to do. I believe your suggestion is a good idea. However, it all depends on the external environment, the professional capability, of course. On your second question, as you said, we do not have a clear definition in our regulation. I talked to Mr. Zhao and other experts during lunch today. We also talked about this issue. Do we need more specific regulations in this regard? As I said, it is quite impossible for us to define that very clearly in our regulation. Otherwise, we don't have much leeway or possibility to explain in the future cases. So we will not come up with a very clear definition. The confusion that you might have is that sometimes different interpretation in different provinces and different cities. This is many people posed this question to me previously, so we will work on this in the future to see the possibility of further clarifying the definition. So the anticipation you should have is that we'll have stricter rules in the future, but I can't give you a very clear answer to you. We will further our discussion within our authority bodies to come to the conclusion at this early date.
Question. We have a question here.
Hi everybody, my name is Angelo Cecchini and I come from Leonardo company. As we saw, safety is the greatest challenge in the aviation industry, either for all OEMs and for operators. I have a question for Mr. Ferreira, and I have also a question possibly for Mr. Harlow. For Mr. Ferreira, I would like to know what was the approach of the company Airbus to deal with such unfortunate event of the 225, and if this criticality brought any concern in terms of SMS, practices, design, and approach to safety. May I go with the second question? Okay. So we, Leonardo, have the point of view of the OEM, but how Babcock mitigate the challenges that operating a mixed fleet, a large mixed fleet, may raise?
Thank you.
So to answer to your first question, so I will raise a very generic answer to your questions. By respect of the first anniversary of this tragedy, which will be Saturday of this week, an helicopter accident, as you know, as been also an OEM, is always a tragedy, is revealing on either on the operator side or every chain doing the helicopter operation, helicopter manufacturing, helicopter design, and so on. It really gives the opportunity to learn and to further increase the knowledge of every participant, being the one of the OEM, being the one of the agency, and being the one of any regulatory bodies and so on. So related to the 225, we are actively participating to the investigations, supporting the different bodies involved in it, with the real target to learn as much as possible for us, as well for all the watercraft industries, what will have prevent this tragedy. And we are looking to a common sharing of data of the lessons learned of this particular event at rotorcraft level. And as you may know, this has been underlined by initiative, a joint initiative which we share with Leonardo, Airbus Helicopters, and EASA in the frame of the rotorcraft sectorial group advisory body, where we jointly decided to launch a working group on dynamic systems, reliability and safety, and adequation of certification rules. So we are working with you, the other, all necessary aspects of looking at this. I will no more further comment on this. I hope I have answered your questions. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
With regard to dealing with a mixed fleet, the first thing that we've done is we've actually initiated a program to review the fleet and make it smaller in terms of types. The other way we deal with it is by keeping a number of AOCs to an extent separate from each other. Then we can manage the aircraft within the AOC groups. What we have done, however, is made sure that we've got communication between those teams that operate the same type. So, for example, we've got over 70 EC135s, and all of the engineering directors involved in, if I remember correctly, 5 out of our 11 AOCs are in contact, and we share that information. So it comes back to sharing information between the right people and in a timely manner so that we're able to deal with issues. And that is the way we can manage it. But you're absolutely right. The best way to deal with a mixed fleet is to have one type, but that just doesn't work in the business that we're in.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Yes, we have one.
I have a question to Mr. Liu concerning of his view of general aviation development in China. It's not directly related to helicopters, but also to, especially to the lower end of general aviation, starting with ultralights, LSAs, and Part 23 planes. What is his view for the next 5 years?
Thank you.
Thank you. In my sense is the low end kind of is a smaller aircraft with the seats of 30 seats fewer than the 30 seats. I would say that there's a big opportunity to develop in China. There are several reasons that I have that sense. First of all, China's economy is still developing rapidly. There are more and more people whose income has increased. And in the past, like Ms. Zhao Yan, people used not to be able to afford the EMS service. Now they can. Secondly, China is geographically wide. Many of the airspaces have not been fully developed. Last year, the U.S. has 800 million passengers, and in China, we have 490 million passengers within the year. But our population is 3 times of the U.S. And in the China's west, where it has a plateau, very mountainous, and there, short haul transportation, there should be markets for these airplanes. And for helicopters, our moderator said EU has 7,000. We have many fewer helicopters in China. And fourthly, as the control of airspace changes, if it's more relaxed, then there will be a lot of space. And so it will also be opportunity for the market. So in short, the general aviation, the smaller, lighter aircraft, the market is looks very nice. In the 13 5-year plan or the next 14 5-year plan, I wouldn't be surprised there would be a big development. But I can't give you any number. Prediction is always dangerous. Thank you for your question.
There may be further questions, but unfortunately, I'm sorry, we are at 5 p.m. I will take the last one if you promise to be very quick. You had a question? Last one, sorry. Yes.
I'm from Xijian. First, I'd like to ask Mr. Harlow, what's the diameter of your aircraft coverage? And secondly, how many hours each year your craft covers? And your medical personnel and the pilot would be trained for how many hours? How do you evaluate whether they have reached the professional adequacy and standard?
Thank you for your question. The coverage that Babcock has is for the whole of Europe and Australia, covering many different roles, but the EMS does cover all that area. The next question, in terms of flying hours, I'm afraid I couldn't give you the number. It's in the region of, I believe, 500,000, there or thereabouts. And finally, in terms of training, the usual training would be for all our crews will be to go to a simulator. And we aim to get every single one of our crews to a simulator twice a year. They would also then carry out their proficiency check and operational proficiency check 6 monthly apart. On top of that, there will then be the role training and line training that's carried out as part of initial training and then is updated through the year. So in terms of training hours, it would be in the region of 15 to 20 in the simulator and airborne.
Thank you. I'm really sorry, but I have reached the allowed time limit. So let me conclude by, first of all, thanking wholeheartedly my panel members for their contribution, but also thanking you for your attention and for your time. I hope that you found this panel interesting, and I look forward having maybe a similar discussion in the future, but with many more helicopters operating in China. Thank you very much. Xie xie. See you soon.